Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. So I leave the country for a few days and everything comes apart. I'm in the UK, and as I'm trying to leave, I get out of there, and then like 2 hours later, the entire air traffic control system for the country shuts down. I almost get stranded in Bongland for intermediate amount of time, and then I get to Florida, and there's a hurricane on its way. And in the middle of all of this, we've had Trump with indictments and mug shots and everything else. So it's good to be back. But joining me to talk about all the madness with Trump, the mug shots, the indictments, the trials, everything going on is Wade Stotts from the Wade Show. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, absolutely. If anybody hasn't been checking out Wade's show, it's very, very funny. It's great stuff. Make sure that you go ahead, check out his channel. I think he's on YouTube and then has a longer show on his premium service as well. But very funny. Make sure that you are watching those episodes. But Wade had a really good take. Like I said, we've had the indictments, we had the mugshot come out, and I think he had a really good take on his show, kind of looking at the two processes. Right, we've got something pretending to be the GOP primary, and then we have the actual election happening simultaneously. So Wade, why don't you kind of get that into that for people real quick?
Yeah, well, last week was pretty wild because we had, I think on Tuesday, we had the arrest of like Rudy Giuliani and like 8 other people, Jenna Ellis and several other folks got their mugshots taken. And then the next day, we had Trump getting arrested and getting his mugshot taken. And then between those two events, we had the GOP debate where everybody got to get on stage and talk about the issues and talk about whether the Social Security age should be raised, or,
How much money are we getting to Ukraine and Israel?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm going to send more. I'm going to send more. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all competing for this sort of prize, while at the same time, again, the actual political opposition is getting treated this way. So the way that things are going, yeah, we've got this kind of real thing. We've got people getting prosecuted, getting indicted, legal warfare going on. And then at the same time, we've got, Black Rifle Coffee ads and on Rumble, and we've got all this kind of stuff going on simultaneously, while and both of them are pretending to be where the real resistance lies. So the guys on the stage really want to present themselves as the resistance, as we're going to dismantle the system, we're going to take it down, and the system itself is acting like that's not true. Whether it's true or not, they're at least acting like somebody else is more of a threat. So yeah, that was basically my take. Is we've got two processes. One process is real, one process is theatrical, sort of like my pastor said something about it being like Lexington and Concord reenactments, like where everybody gets to put on their costumes and pretend that we're actually doing a battle here. But the outcome is sort of decided for us, whether we have debates or not.
So this is kind of weird, right? And I know this makes a lot of people who aren't Trump fans angry. And I'll just couch this real quick. Like, I think a lot of people know that I'm generally, while I think that democracy is wildly fake and really doesn't get the job done.
Fake and something else.
Sure. Yeah, something else that I'm going to avoid for a moment. But while they know that this is the case, I do think that Trump is a more effective kind of tool to shake up the system. I'm not so much excited about the Trump governance. I don't really expect his really important white paper outlines for trade with whoever. More about the way that Trump impacts the system. So when people say, "Oh, you're a Trump supporter," it's like, well, in the sense that I think he's more disruptive to the system. Not that I'm super excited about his ability to rule. Sure. But a lot of people who aren't Trump fans, they look at this and they say, "Oh, well, framing it the way you just did is a coronation of Trump, right? It's exactly what the system wants. They want this guy. They know that someone like DeSantis or Nikki Haley or somebody would be like way more dangerous, and so they're way more electable, and so they're trying to force Trump on us." There's especially a lot of mainstream pundits who kind of push this idea that like the key is getting him out there. And so they don't like this framing because like obviously it just sidelines out of all the other candidates. Like, what do you say to that? Where like, well, by stepping in this, you're stepping into the leftist frame. You're accepting the candidate that they're making specifically kind of unelectable, and so therefore you're playing into their game.
Well, I would think that that were the case if if the left were treating it that way. So I think that the left was going after Trump and has been going after Trump for a long time. Not just I think that they've been going after him for a long time before DeSantis was some kind of national figure, and so people weren't trying to get us away from DeSantis during the Russia collusion stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that thinking that there has been a huge pivot for the reason why they're going after Trump is sort of odd without a bunch of evidence about it. And yeah, I mean, like Nikki Haley, of course, wants to say like, oh, they're really scared of me because I'm a woman and I'm a child of immigrants, and that again, they're not prosecuting you, and so it doesn't at least seem that way. Again, we can only look at it from the outside, and I don't want to again read people's minds that at some level they've now shifted their reasoning for doing the exact same thing they've been doing since 2015.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You can see how unhinged these people have been the whole time about him, and how ravenously they've kind of gone after him after trying to get him into the spot because they thought he would be unelectable, which is kind of the funny part. It backfired on him the first time, so even if you're trying to make that point, I'm not sure why it wouldn't backfire again. But
No.
either way, the point is like it's very clear that the press believes that this guy is a really dangerous threat on some level. Interesting thing though, in 2015, obviously he got a lot of free press for just being who he was, right? A lot of like when he's on Morning Joe all the time and that kind of thing. A lot of people speculated that the liberal media basically nominated this guy because they gave him in-kind donations out the wazoo by plastering him everywhere and telling everybody to be scared of him. But in 2020 they kind of dialed that back, right? They kind of knew that putting Trump in front of cameras, especially with a opposition, was a dangerous thing, right? And it feels like with Trump out of office for a few years, they forgot that lesson, right? Like we saw him in the CNN town hall debate, and you could almost see like the rejuvenation of Donald Trump live there on stage as he got to once again, destroy gladiators for the amusement of the crowd. And then now they've just kind of ramped this up, and with this throwing out his mugshot there, it's more like they're trying to turn him into Jesse James than they're trying to and so it feels like they forgot that lesson and they're buying right back into Trump's strength, which is putting him in this adversarial process where he gets to best his enemies for his supporters.
Yeah, and it would also all of that kind of way of thinking would depend on somebody's thinking that the left thinking that Trump isn't popular enough. Like people don't love Trump enough. We've got to make sure that they love him even more.
Right.
It seems again like an odd thing, but it's not that they were really nice to Trump until DeSantis came along, and then all of a sudden, oh well, man, we got to make sure to get people away from this real threat. And most of the way of thinking about that, where we've got to make Trump unelectable, we got to make Trump popular, and then because we know that we can win, is all dependent on also believing, we all know that 2020 was the freest and the fairest, right?
Most free, most fair.
The freest and the fairest. And in 2024, we can assume that it will be even more free and even more fair. But if we act as if the freeness and the fairness will not be turned up, as if we think it'll just sort of stop at some level, at some point, then yeah, we can't really talk about electability. Like all those free and fair, all those whatever fortifying, all the election fortification measures are sort of, again, it's sort of buying into the populist kind of delusion where you're like, okay, well, he's not popular enough, we got to make him more popular, and you're all steering popular opinion, which is something that they don't have to do that. They understand how power works a lot better than we, like analysts out here sort of guessing at their motives.
Yeah, I kind of made a point similar on Twitter yesterday that there's a lot of people, of course, and I get it. Like people want to believe that the process is still going forward, right? Like this is the ritual. This is what we do. This is how we transfer our legitimacy to our government. Like obviously, like this is kind of core to much of our identity, and so you can't and of course, there's a lot of machinery. There's a lot of people making money. There's a lot of political consultants. There's a lot of media officials. Like you need to have the conversation about the horse race, and what are we going to debate about, and who's winning in what state, and blah 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 blah. You got to do all this polling, and like all these things need to get done. All these pockets need to get lined, and so the media apparatus isn't going to want to like shift off of this normal routine of having basically like prefabricated content. It's weird. Like once you've been in the content business, you can see how much of this is just like Domino's pizza showing up to your door because it's Tuesday. And you're just like, oh man, okay, well that's not good because we're talking about like the actual constitutional continuance of our government. So we probably shouldn't just like roll this stuff off of the assembly line. But it feels like there's so much of that has to continue. So we can't have the conversation about like how this is all being disrupted because that might disrupt like our regularly scheduled media narrative.
Yeah, and if they didn't do the day after the debate show where everybody talks about who won, and then you get on different people, you get the callers to come in and they debate, and we debate the on-air personalities, and everybody gets their paycheck and everything's fine. But yeah, you can't do that if that's not actually the issue. And everybody on that stage wanted to make sure that they were talking. They wanted to frame everything in terms of these are the issues that are facing America. This is the most important stuff. And it was obviously climate change. And we saw all of that. But the actual issue that will affect the most Americans and every election going forward is elections themselves. And so that wasn't part of the debate.
Not anybody, not a single person talking about ballot harvesting, not a single question about like how we're going to change our strategy to get, to the same day voting, reduce mail-in fraud. Like not a word of this from anybody.
Right. Exactly. And the only person who is talking about that is the guy who's getting arrested. And so we all see what happens to people who do talk that way. And so, yeah, we start to get signals. We were talking earlier about like people wanting the process to continue because that's the way that it continues. I mean, we all grew up in a sort of system where, like, the first time I voted, I went online and I found an online quiz that would go through and I could answer multiple choice questions, and I would be able to, at the end of it, find out who my candidate was because 87% of my views are aligned with candidate X. And I go, great, that's my candidate. I'll vote for that person. And that's really just not the way anything ever worked. And so at least when I thought it was working that way, and we could all just sort of like maintain our ideological purity, it's not the way things actually are. I was thinking, I went to Walmart the other day. This will connect, I promise. I went to Walmart the other day and I was thinking, like, looking around, I had a friend who worked the night shift at Walmart in a tiny town in Arkansas. And he said that he was trained not to stop shoplifters. This is the first time I heard it. I heard it back in high school. He was telling me this. And when he was explaining this to me, I was going, oh, this is crazy. And then the other day I went to Walmart and just thought, like, everybody here, this whole system is really dependent on everybody trying their hardest to do the right thing, despite the inconvenience and all of that. So I've got to go get my toothpaste and I've got to go to the front of the thing. I got to wait in line. I got to stick my card in, beep, beep, boop, and then get out. But as soon as somebody realizes, oh, I don't have to go through that whole hassle, I don't have to even spend any money, I can get through it all. It's the same kind of thing with, getting off of airplanes. Everybody gets off of airplanes and like if I get off first, the whole system doesn't break down. But if enough people sort of catch on to, I can be the exception in the high trust thing. And then enough people sort of do that. And I think that the candidates who are on the stage are people who are like in a like post-apocalyptic world where there's nobody's in the store and they're like walking up to the front with their toothpaste and like looking around for a clerk and like ringing the bell, like, hey, and wishing that this system was still going so that everything could be back to normal. They could pretend that we live in high trust, that all of the rules that we were taught about how life works can continue on. But sadly, it just isn't that way. And I'm not, obviously we're not living in post-apocalyptic world, but as soon as those first signs, like the longer people hold on to the idea that we aren't headed there, or at least going to where we're going to a low trust society, the longer their illusions are going to be intact. So like the longer you hold on to it, the harder it is to let go of it. And it's difficult. It's difficult personally.
Yeah, no, I try to explain this to people all the time. They're like, well, I don't understand why the left keeps winning this thing. Well, they just hand out money to people and they never seem to have the consequences. Like, yeah, because they're rated. They know the treasury's open. Like they know there's no one standing at the cash register. They know there's no security's not going to stop them on the way out the door. The only question is your guys grab all the toothpaste or they grab all the toothpaste, right? It's not a question of whether two-story paste is going out the door if anyone's paying for it. The answer is no. So the question is who's walking out the door with it. That's a terrible situation to be in. You hope that your society doesn't end up there, but you're a fool to to keep standing at the counter while the other guy just runs out the door continuously. But yeah, no, I think it's very interesting that the one guy at the debate, like the one guy who's broken through, I think everybody kind of knew, everyone else is a known quantity, right? You've got Nikki Haley and stuff like that, who are just kind of the most obvious candidates in the world. Mike Pence, people who just were always going to be kind of embarrassing the establishment. We have Ron DeSantis, who's like, he's somewhere in the middle. He's competent. He knows what he's doing. He clearly brushes the establishment the wrong way on certain things, but he's not Trump, right? Like, and people know that. Like, he is the I want somebody who seems like they're pushing back against the establishment, but isn't Trump guy. And then you have Vivek, right? He kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. And Vivek is the only one who's really seen, I think, significant poll movement in the forward direction, at least, because he's kind of out there doing like Trump light, I think, in a lot of ways. And so I wonder what you think about that. Do you a lot of people have said he's a plant by the Trump campaign to blow up DeSantis. Other people think he's just running for a cabinet position, or maybe even vice president if he's very lucky. It's not like Pence is going back in that slot. So what do you think about Vivek? Is he really on the outside? Does he really think he's running? Is he looking for a position in a possible Trump situation? Seems dangerous to run for a cabinet position in a White House where people are going to jail right now.
Yeah, well, and I like Vivek. I like what he says. I think that people are also refreshed that so the reasons they like Trump was because it sounded like he was saying what he thought. Mm-hmm. And not what somebody else cooked up for him. I think that's exactly why people are flocking to Vivek. Obviously, he's saying the same points. So so the ideas are the same, but he's also, again, at least acting like he's not bought and paid for, which I appreciate. And it's good. It's, at least good marketing. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's capable as a politician, as a conversation partner, as an interview, which, I mean, it's people try to downplay that, and just because they like DeSantis's policies a little bit more, or they just want him or think that he'd be more of a threat. But you can't really downplay his, again, ability to communicate clearly, his ability to show up on any show and be able to, again, he shows up on CNN and they try to play a clip out of context. He calls them out for it. Those are great moves, and it does move people. We'll see. I mean, I won't speculate about whether he's a plant or whatever, but he is certainly, he is better suited to be VP than Pence is, or at least he understands kind of what's going on. So he understands that everybody there is kind of competing for the second spot, and everybody who's trying to counter signal Trump is doing the opposite of that. And yeah, so it's I think it's good for Vivek to do. It's smart for him to do. I'll leave the secret inner workings of it for speculation. I'll go think about this after the show, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right that he's definitely running the smartest plan, right? Like, everybody else is running on I'm not Trump, and he's running on I'm Trump, but you can't vote for Trump right now because whatever reason. So, which is a good thing to do, because I think one of the delusions that the Republican Party had was that Trump had, Trump, their base temporarily supported Trump, when the truth is Trump had a base, and the Republican Party it didn't have one anymore. And so they're very confused that, like, oh, you just take Trump out of this equation, and then everything kind of goes back to normal. It's like, no. These voters are not yours anymore. You do not. They're not yours anymore. They go to Vivek, they go to Tucker Carlson, they go to somebody else who understands to talk to them. But you've lost them. Like, no longer wield the kind of the mechanism over them anymore.
And if Vivek is going for a cabinet position or going for VP or whatever that is, again, at least he's doing something. At least he knows what he's doing. And everybody else there is under the impression, Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and Doug Bergman is under the impression that we're all here to try to get our poll numbers up, because when our poll numbers go up, then we become president. Right. and like that's just not what's happening there. And I appreciate, at least I'm assuming again that Vivek understands that.
Right.
We'll see.
So before we get to the Trump shot, the Trump mugshot. I do want to talk to you about what you mentioned before, which a lot of people aren't focusing on, which is the 10 other people who were arrested in this,
Yeah.
right? Like, most specifically, a lot of lawyers,
Mhm.
people who advise Trump. We've already seen this a number of obviously Trump cabinet officials and other people connected to the Trump campaign have been arrested or investigated, had their lives destroyed, kind of due to their connection. Of course, from one side, the left will just say, "Oh, that's because they're all corrupt." It just so happens that all of our political enemies happen to be corrupt. How lucky for us! Anyone who has any kind of real threat to us just happens to be a criminal. Man, that's how amazingly convenient. That just, if we lock them away, it's totally justified. But for anybody who's not complete slavering idiot, like obviously, like it seems like there's a very real effort to criminalize any real opposition, and especially when you start going after people's lawyers, like now you just don't have Sixth Amendment, right?
Right.
Like we've lost so many other amendments, but now we're getting rid of like even the illusion that you're allowed to have an attorney represent you, because any attorney who represents you is literally putting their freedom on the line. Like
Yeah.
anybody who works for Trump, advises him in any capacity, could very well end up being, criminally prosecuted for daring
Yeah.
to be a part of this. And we live in a regime, whether we like it or not, which is based on complex technical managerialism, which means you need to have tons of lawyers, tons of experts, cabinet officials, highly educated and credentialed people need to be part of basically everything you do every step of the way. If you don't do this, you're going to get crushed by the procedure. If anybody who works for you, anybody who has put all their time and all their effort and still managed to get out through all of these incredibly progressive, educational systems and DA's offices and everything else, and still be willing to work for a Republican, if they know that going and working for these people will immediately get them arrested or end up putting them through a process that kind of cost them $1 million or more in attorney fees for themselves, who's ever going to defend this person? Who's ever going to work for a Republican that actually threatens the system again?
Yeah. And the most recent case is all about lying. So that's like the central issue. Did Trump actually believe that what he was doing was rescuing the election from the bad guys, or did he think that he was sort of wanting people to find votes that weren't there? That's at the center of it. And then so he brings in other people to give him legal advice. And so, number one, they have to prove that Trump thought something. So they have to mind read him or find some kind of private conversation where he said something that is obviously saying that what I'm doing out here is lying. And he's also got to talk, about the lawyers, and the lawyers don't have to agree with their client.
Right.
Like the lawyer can see, oh, well, whether I think this person's guilty, innocent, whatever, or whether I think that this election was the freest and the fairest, or they believe some crazy lie. If whatever they think, they're there to help their client. And if whatever their private beliefs are, that's the worst thing that they can say, is that they were acting on something that they didn't believe. They were giving him the best advice that they could. And has that become a crime? I mean, and we'll see if that is enough. Believing something and helping your client to attain X is, again, here I go trying to apply general principles to this case. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. And it obviously is going after him because he is Donald Trump. It's not like nobody's going like, well, I guess lawyers can't do that anymore. It's what the specific end that he wanted. And that's the thing they want to stop.
Yeah, the law is exactly just subject to the current political interpretation. There's no, like you said, there's no general rule we can understand from this. We can extract from this. It's not applicable to everyone. It's just because he happens to be in this particular.
Yeah, it's not that tweeting about OAN is illegal. It's that him doing it at that time for that reason.
I have encouraged people to watch OAN at least 7 different times.
Oh, no.
From when I've appeared there, so I might need to retain a counsel. I don't know.
Auron, come on.
Yeah. It's all over for me, guys. I'll start my prison notebook. I'll get my Gramsci
picture the mugshot now. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Make sure I need to work on my blue steel before I end up in that situation.
Absolutely. Well, how great was the face?
So now we actually get into the mugshot itself, right? Yeah. So obviously amazing mugshot. Like whatever you think about it, like just like Trump knew exactly what he was doing. He must have practiced that several times before he got in there. Took exactly the Zoolander face, threw it right up. And the amazing thing about the mugshot is it's simultaneously like it really is the Scott Adams, two movies on one screen, where you got the exact same mugshot. All the Trump supporters were, this is amazing. They've destroyed themselves. This is the end. They'll never get Trump now. He's an outlaw. He's a hero. This shows how he's the rebel, and this is going to be. All of the anti-Trump people were like, he's a criminal. It's over for him. He'll never blah 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 blah. What is this? Did either of them have a legitimacy to what they're seeing at? What does this mugshot actually do you think, for him at the end of the day?
Yeah, it is almost like they could have just released a Rorschach test and then said that was the mugshot.
Or just put the ink block up. And,
exactly. Yeah. And everybody goes like, wow, Trump is the best. Or other people don't. Yeah, I think that it absolutely just makes people reinforced in what they believe. Nobody's mind was changed about their candidate based on, or about Trump based on that mugshot. But what it does do, and that's I think part of the issue. We're 4 indictments in, right? This is the first mugshot. And so did these other, like Jack Smith and all these guys, did they just have the sense to know, well, it's going to further reinforce people's loyalty, so we don't want to do that? And then Fannie Willis is just like, let's get him. Let's do whatever it takes. And I think that's probably what it is. They just
I was going to say, I am on the side of incompetence here. Like, incompetence does seem the most likely. Yeah. Like, guys, it's not stupidity or malice. It can be both. And here it is most certainly Occam's razor. No, gone. Done. It's defeated.
Man.
But yeah, no, I really think it feels like it's something that they shouldn't have done. Everybody else had a level of discipline. I don't know that it helps Trump long term, with the American people, but it seems like every other person involved in this process knew better, and she was just like, no, like just had that wild-eyed girl boss. I'm taking him down.
Well, I mean, there was a clip of the whatever sheriff or whatever giving a presentation about it and just going like, he's gonna get a mugshot. Like he just had this smug look on his face. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that they were sitting there going, if they had the restraint. If they would have had the restraint in that press conference not to smirk, then I would have thought, ooh, maybe there is some big plan here. But at least at that level, they don't have the self-control to hold themselves back.
So we know that obviously the debate took place. Now Trump comes over the top from the turnbuckle with the elbow and just drops the Tucker Carlson interview.
Yeah,
it gets way more attention. It gets way more views. I'll say the interview didn't seem very impressive. He seemed old, honestly. Like Trump seemed old and tired, which makes perfect sense. Both of these guys should be sitting on a porch somewhere with a rocking chair and a nice pillow and a good blanket, and handing out Werthers to any kind young women who happen to walk by. That's the stage of life that both of these guys are in.
They deserve the coziest. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's very confusing that both of these guys are like in the position they're in. But I mean, Trump obviously is much more there than Biden, but he seems to have kind of lost a step a little bit. Maybe that's good. I mean, the speed at which Trump traveled, perhaps taking the foot just slightly off the pedal is an improvement overall. But the thing that happens is not so much, it's not really that, like you said in your video, it's not that Trump did it at all. It's not what Trump said, it's that he did it, and that kind of changes things. What do you think that does for the process going forward? Like, obviously you're probably not just going to have, a guy with Trump's popularity, like popping on, an alternative platform, destroy all debates from here on out. But like, what do you think the fact that the entire process can be just upstaged by a random internet broadcast do to the idea that this formal process of the GOP selection process really matters?
Well, it's obviously a point about media. I mean, we can obviously say it's obviously a point about Twitter versus Fox News, and I think Rumble was also the GOP was streaming it on Rumble, and so it's a comment about where things are going media wise. It's also a huge comment on the importance of personalities. So it's not like anybody. It's not like if Tim Scott would have decided to get an interview with I don't know, Chris Wallace, and they decided that they were going to do a Twitter.
Just halted the process.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not watching the debate. We're going to watch Tim Scott.
He's on Twitter or X. Yeah. So that it's not entirely a position on just the media. It's not that this is just inherently better. It's that it is a way around the official process for people that people already care about. I think that's probably the biggest lesson, is that no matter, I mean, you said this before, no matter what we might think, politics is about loyalty.
Yeah.
And it is about personalities. And so people have more loyalty to Trump than they do to the entire group of people standing there on that stage. It's just the case. I mean, we can just see that in the numbers. We can see that in terms of votes. I mean, like, you know, Trump getting all those votes in 2020 is not nothing. And it's more votes than any of the other people standing there have ever gotten. So again, it's media and it's personality, both at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. Like, I know this scares people a lot, but it's just what it is. Like, when the process is the problem, you need something that can be above the process, right? And at this point, it is personality. It's not loyalty to a party. It's not loyalty to an ideology. It's loyalty to one guy who promised to do things and take care of me, right?
Yeah.
And the system destroyed him for doing it,
Mhm.
right? That it's hard to get past that reality with people. You talk to these people, and I am in a neighborhood where the Trump flags never came down. You know, to this day, there's at least 10 houses just within 2 streets of me where the majority of the decor around their house is Trump. You know, I voted Trump, don't blame me stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, this is a real thing. And whether, I don't think Trump deserves it. Like, I really don't. I think he's an imperfect vessel for this. I think this is how desperate people are, that they'll entrust this to someone like Trump, because they're just desperate for anybody who even smells like they might, kind of be worthy of this. But when you're looking at a process like this and you have a personality like Trump's, you can stand above it, right? You can stand above something that's obviously sick and decaying and dying and becoming irrelevant. And something like Tucker's interview allows a person like that to step beyond the oligarchy, step beyond the machine, and say, I'm going to interface directly with these people. So, like you said, Asa Hutchinson doesn't get to do this, right? That doesn't really work for him. But if you have the right combination, if you have the person touching the right voter base, working with the right platform, it is still possible to kind of escape from kind of the media circus and its controlled environment.
Yeah. Well, we've got a guy up here. I'm in northern Idaho. We've got a guy who drives around constantly. I don't know if he has a job, but he just drives around with 2 flags. One says like Trump 2024, and the other says FJB. So those, like, that guy. And if I were to like wave that guy down, stop him, and say like, "Hey, who do you think won the debate?" He doesn't care,
right?
Like he knows who he's voting for. He knows who he's excited about, because he has personal loyalty to this guy. And I was gonna say, it would be great if we could all be just pure like ideologues and have our brains floating around and just pick everybody, like all the brains that think this way go over here. But it wouldn't be great.
No,
it would not. It would actually be an entire, like, it would cut us all off. We've talked before about C.S. Lewis and the abolition of man. Like, we are not just heads, and we need loyalties. We need like things that tie us together. And yeah, it is sort of sad that there is all of this personal loyalty to Trump. He's not, again, I don't think he deserves it either. I agree with you. But it does speak to people personally. That is going to be expressed in views on whatever platform. So he was on the Fox News debate in 2015, even when he wasn't as popular as he is now, and they got record views again. So they're following personalities. I'm glad that the avenues exist to circumvent all this stuff, because otherwise, yeah, I mean, you have a sort of another event. Like, if the internet didn't exist, if Twitter didn't exist, and Tucker hadn't just been fired, then what else would he do? He'd just host a rally, and that wouldn't have the exact amount of impact. Again, it wouldn't matter the content. It would what matters is the competition. And I mean, I think he clearly won with eyeballs, those votes.
Right. And then I think that's really key, because again, people say, oh, well, it's not principled to be loyal to like one guy. It's like, well, it is principled. What you're talking about is ideology, and ideology. The thing about loyalty to ideology is it's slippery. It can always be slightly tweaked. It can always be recombined and adjusted. It can always be redefined to make it okay to betray somebody. But like, loyalty to particular people requires you to go somewhere else, right? It requires you to see bonds of a person, and that's why it's so easy for people to betray their families today, right? Like, oh, you don't agree the current progressive NPC talking point? well, then it's more than fine for me to disown you. I don't have to take care of my parents when they get old. I don't have to, worry about what they think. I don't have to live under these rules because at the end of the day, my loyalty to the regime frees me from my dependency, my loyalty to my family, my religion, my community, right? And
Right.
so there's always a reason to defect because in principle, I'm a principled person. I can just, find a reason why these people are unworthy of my sacrifice, my time, my commitment. And so, again, I know it worries people, but like when you have a person in that scenario, you don't have that ability to wiggle as much,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean that person just doesn't have to earn it. Does it? Again, I don't
Right.
think Trump really he has earned it. I don't think he really deserves what he has. But they
Yeah.
should have. But I encourage people, even if you hate Trump, to observe the phenomenon.
Mhm.
Like even if you have a little bit of here's my Machiavellian, guys. Like draw back a little bit, and rather than focusing on who Trump is or whether he deserves this or whether he's got the policy chops or the whatever to get this through and get the job done, stop staring just directly at your emotional love or hate. Even looking at Trump's record, pull back and understand the forces behind Trump and understand why they aren't the forces behind DeSantis or Haley or Tim Scott. I think Tim Scott's like a nice guy. Like I
Sure.
actually like the difference between Tim Scott and everybody else in that the summit event was that I think Tim Scott, even though he was embarrassing, like shared the values of the people in the room.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
where like everybody else there was just like obviously they don't care about these people, right? Like
Yeah.
like you're not a defense contractor. None of you can get me on a corporate board. Like like it's very clear that they're just working through all of the
Yeah.
check marks that they need to. As we're like
Mhm.
he at least felt like he's somebody who would go to church with these people on Sunday, right?
Right.
And mean it. But it's just interesting that this loyalty to a person, even if you don't like that person, just understand where that energy comes from and why it won't transfer to again somebody like DeSantis, somebody like Haley, something like that.
Yeah. Well, and what you just said about loyalty, you said loyalty, like it's not just that the left is loyal to ideology and the right is loyal to people. It's that people are loyal to people,
Right.
and that is true of the left too. So it's not true that like the left just has these principles that they're aspiring to, and as long as they're consistent with that ideology, they're actually loyal to the regime, just like you said. They value the opinion of the regime over the value of their family, or they
Mhm.
value the opinion of the regime over their church, and so they get to deconstruct and they get to leave all of their like local ties, their unchosen bonds, and so yeah, they get to choose their loyalty now to the regime. And if you understand that, then you can again understand that we're not operating in a like the kind of thing where again you go on and you take an online quiz and it's this impersonal percentage point and that decides who you need to vote for because they express your opinions better.
So now I guess let's get to the post mugshot fallout. So the next thing that's happened that has kind of made what's already a cartoonish process even more cartoonish is now we have judges like battling to be the very first one to be allowed to mess with the election, like which is already like you're obviously and
Yeah.
guys, I hate to I'm gonna shatter the hearts of some people here, but like we've already talked about, the elections of 2000, as free and as fair as they are, they're going to continue to be or be increasingly more free and fair. There
Oh,
was
yeah.
there's this narrative illusion that like that Trump was a specific anomaly and 2000 was a one-time thing, and even though a lot of people who would admit that it's wrong would say, oh, but they're not going to have the energy to do this again, right? They're never going to have the focus, that they all came together in this one moment, but they can't do that every election, right? And then literally one election later, they're trying to lock people into prison. And so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
people are still repeating that narrative. They're still saying like, oh, they're not going to try to fortify this election after there's just no way they can coordinate that again,
Yeah.
like literally as they're watching 4 different indictments go
Yeah.
through on the majority on like the
Right.
leading candidate of the opposition party.
Yeah. You
So
don't
it's
have to
like
speculate. Yeah. It's happening.
yeah,
Right.
we don't years out we're already in this place like sorry, but the energy's going to be there for a
Right.
minute, like
Right.
I hate to break this to everybody, but um obviously we have, the judge in Georgia wanted to, the most recent indictment, the one from which the mugshot came from, wanted to hold the trial the day before Super Tuesday, right? Like right before, just happened. Could have been scheduled any given day, but just happened to be the day before the most important campaigning day of any primary candidate. Whoopsie daisy! How did this possibly happen? The governor of Georgia was like, no, we're not doing brackets. Like, no, we're not. We're in. And so the DC judge is just like, actually, well, we've got an indictment too, and we also just happen to have this one slot open on exactly this day right before Super Tuesday. Amazing coincidence. Don't know how this scheduling error happened. So now that you guys aren't putting him in, we'll just put, pencil him in for exactly the same day. Again, just randomly. No, nothing. But it kind of at this point, like, I don't know. I guess I don't have a question here other than who are we kidding, right? Like who are we kidding with this at this point?
Yeah, no, it is hilarious that they can be quite as long as they don't say it out loud that that's what they're doing, then everything can continue on and everybody gets to pretend that there is some amount of coincidence in it all. And it is an odd thing. I wonder what the conversations are like in the other GOP candidate camps. Are they going like, yes, yeah, right? Are they at some level relieved? Like, oh, cool. Surely they'll never come for me. Like I'm faster than this guy. The Bears
I'm feeding the crocodile last.
Exactly. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, no, I assume that's what's happening. I hope not. I hope that all these guys are maybe not in Tim Scott's case. You said he's a nice guy, so
I don't know. He's like I said, he just seemed like the one human on stage that actually cared about the values of the people he was talking.
And he wasn't as polished, but that was kind of endearing. Sure.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's embarrassing. Like he's just kind of randomly like standing up and like, thrusting in front of Tucker Carlson in very odd ways on his way to walk across the stage and like, face everybody. It was definitely one for the cringe bin, but at least, like I said, at least it felt like, that's because he was nervous, not because he just didn't care.
Yes.
He wasn't immediately pivoting into like, well, that's not really my concern. How many tanks can I cram into the head of a pin in Ukraine? Like that was not his immediate pivot on every question. So
it's good for Tim.
Yeah. It's a low bar, but he cleared it admirably. So I want to give him some credit for it. But yeah, so I guess we continue to see this kind of cartoon roll up of the process rolling out with the indictment dates and everything. Like you said, as long as no one kind of says out loud what's happening, apparently the GOP process is just going to continue to pretend like this. The most important thing isn't the indictment; it's it's retirement reform or something like that. So obviously, a lot of this is going to hinge on what happens with Trump, even though even let him run. But I guess the next big barrier is you have a number of people, even some people from the GOP. I believe there's like a DA somewhere in Massachusetts or something who's a Republican, but they're looking as to whether or not Trump can be removed from the ballot due to the 14th Amendment, right? Because 14th Amendment after the Civil War, one of the things it says is if you were involved in an insurrection, you can't run for president. It's really the only qualification where you can't. Most people don't know this, but you can run for president from jail after committing murder. Like the requirements for being president are you have to be 35, you gotta be born in the United States, and you have to live here for 14 years. That's it. That's the entirety of the thing. You don't need anything else. And so like the 14th Amendment is really the only addendum to that. And and that's the reason, I try to explain to people like insurrection was not a random, you never heard anyone use the word insurrection until J6. And then all of a sudden, magically, everyone, got on the same page, and every media outlet and every Democratic politician just somehow knew that January 6th was an insurrection. That was the term to use. Never heard it before from any of these people, but all of a sudden they knew it was key. And that's because legally in the 14th Amendment, if you can get it qualified as one, technically the person shouldn't be able to qualify.
Yeah. Well, and there are statutes that it's like, okay, well, they could have charged him with insurrection.
Right.
That was an option, but none of these are. It's sort of a like roundabout way of trying to say that that's what he was doing. But again, like if he's not convicted of insurrection, can you still say that he committed one for the purposes of the 14th Amendment? again, like it all just feels like everybody's pushing as hard as they can to try to, like, yeah, it is not an above board process.
Yeah,
I know I'm not telling the audience anything new.
Yeah,
Make
it's
fun of me in
really
the comments. Yeah,
it's really a whatever sticks, right? Like
yeah,
I don't think anyone really expects any one of these things to be the key that takes him down. They're just throwing everything against the wall. Though I have seen the people who think that like the Democrats are desperately hoping for Trump. They're saying like, oh well, the only reason they wouldn't charge him with insurrection is because they wanted him to be the candidate, right? So
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's the reason that they didn't charge him, is they still wanted him to legally be able to run, because they knew that like indicting him would make him unelectable, but they still wanted him to still be the candidate, so they didn't. They just went with all the RICO charges. They didn't hit him with that. So
Yeah.
uh,
Again, Trump not popular enough for the left. They
right.
really wish he were more popular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That seems to be the going theory, at least. So, but yeah, it is fascinating that you kind of have these legal machinations. Still, how I don't even know how we're gonna get to 2024, man. Like I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
trying to. I'm really looking at the country, and I'm just like, how do we continue to pretend there's a legal process
Yeah.
in the next year or so?
Well, anybody who like gives you some kind of specific, this is going to happen right after this happens, is just guessing,
Right.
like, and so anybody who says some kind of confident, oh, this is exactly how 2024 is going to look. No, I mean, we just don't know. And like, okay, so Trump, let's say Trump is the nominee. I assume that's what's going to happen. And then he loses. You've got, you know, arguably half the country who likes him and thinks that their vote doesn't count twice.
Right.
That's bad news. And like that's like and some of those people are in power. Some of those people have like are state governors. What do they do? Like, and again, we still have like the states are still the people who are in charge of these elections. And it's we've got lots of, everybody starts talking about all of our options for how to deal with this whole, like, all of the freeness and the fairness, right? And everybody starts to think like, oh, but we shouldn't cheat, like we don't want to do the thing that they're doing because of X, and I understand that, but we're not even doing everything that we could do legally, like you were
Right.
talking about earlier. All of these state governors, nobody's really pushing hard, and the people who are on the stage evidently don't think it's enough of a big issue to be able to even bring it up at the debate. And if, again, like, obviously they didn't talk about it in the first one, but if they don't talk about it in the second one, then they're, again, second time ignoring the only issue of the election, which is the election.
I thought this is really weird that we didn't get a lot of this. Like DeSantis isn't just sitting on this, because he's one of the few governors that did clean up the electoral process for the
Yeah.
most part in Florida. Like to his credit, one of the things that he did that most other governors did not do is he saw the problem with this and he said, "All right, nope, we're rolling back as much of this as possible." Why doesn't he spend all of his time talking about this? Why doesn't he hit like that just nonstop? It's like, I am an active governor working to remove this, this corruption from our process, while everybody else is, talking about Ukraine or whatever. I'm talking about fixing the legitimacy of our elections. While Donald Trump wants to, pontificate about where he should be with it, like I'm actively taking, like, it seems like the easiest thing in the world for him to run on. It's a
Right.
critical issue, and he still won't touch it.
And you don't have to convince people that it matters. They
Right,
already
right,
know that. Like,
right.
they're looking at this election that they voted in, and at least some of them think that there was enough of a problem that there was action that needed to be taken. And so, again, you don't have to in the way that people are trying to, like, are talking about, like, this is why the Ukraine war is in the interest of in America's interest for us to be involved in doing that. You don't have to convince people in that way to talk about election rules.
Right.
And so, yeah, it seems like $100 bill sitting in the middle of the street. And yeah, DeSantis, I assume it's people in his ear saying, like, don't come off as a conspiracy theorist. You don't want to be lumped in with this guy. You're focusing. And he has been told also, like, don't talk about 2020 or 2021. Talk about 2024, the future. Our best days lie ahead. And I think I think it's a mistake.
How he hasn't fired every campaign consultant he has twice, I don't know. Like, it's like he used to be so good at picking up $100. Literally, that's what he did. He's just like, oh man, that thing's super easy. I ban that. Yeah, Disney, we hate them. Oh, you don't get those tax breaks anymore. You're just picking them up all day long. Is what he did. And then who is telling him this? Just One of the great this is a Napoleon invading Russia in the winter, level of blunder that's just amazing to behold.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I had one more thing I wanted to get to before we went to, and now making fun of campaign consultants has evacuated all
Well,
that.
I'll continue your point.
Okay.
The thing about campaign consultants, I think that like DeSantis seems nervous now, which
Yeah.
is something I haven't seen him ever be. Like he's a good public speaker. He knows how to relate to people. He's not, and I understand that he doesn't like being on the campaign trail. And there's, that's pretty obvious that he's not exactly happy having to do every single stop. But he never seemed nervous this way. And I think that has to be that there's a bunch of dialogue going on in his head, and he's trying not to step on landmines. And I think that's like whoever those people are, let's fire him twice.
Yeah, people forget this, but like one of the reasons he gained some notoriety was not just his effective policy prescriptions, but the fact that he handled the press really well. Like he got into press conferences, he made fun of reporters. He did the Trump thing, right? Like he mauled the media for the crowd. He was able to play it. He was never as good as Trump, but he's pretty good. Like he had a good way about him. And then now we get like the slow half smile of horror doom thing, and it's just like, what happened?
Man.
It's a travesty. It really is.
Hate
to see that level of potential blown up, but I guess there's just nothing that could be done there. You hear the whisper in your ear, and
well, I mean, good news is it does sound like he's going to stay in Florida. So
right. We will continue. Well, that's an interesting aspect too. Depending on how this hurricane goes. He obviously started with one down here last year, but depending on the severity of the hurricane, he might need to focus. That's going to pull him away from the campaign trail. You don't want to be campaigning while your state is going through a major natural disaster. So that'll be nothing to really say about that. Just something to note for for kind of the upcoming. All right, Wade. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the questions of the people here. Look like we got a super chat or two. But before we do that, can you please tell people to find your hilarious work?
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you like it. The Wade Show with Wade is the name of the show. Search it on YouTube. I believe it's right here. The Wade Show with Wade. Mm-hmm. Search that on YouTube, and follow me on Twitter, Wade Stotts. And that's where you can find me.
Yeah, a lot of people were asking the question, who is the host of the Wade Show? Now all secrets have been revealed.
I mean, Auron here, he does put his name in the show, but I got it twice. So
it's superior. You're obviously better at branding than I am. Thank you. I'll make sure that the Blaze takes this under advisement. All right, so Amplier I'm sorry, I know I pronounced all of your weird AEs incorrectly there, but question for $5 here. The GOP doesn't understand the loyalty of Trump's base because they've never have been that loyal to their own base. I mean, that is most certainly true, right? Like the GOP treats their base much better or much worse than the average abused spouse. It's the spouse with abusive alcoholic has a much better keeper than the GOP base. So that is one reason that loyalty is incredibly confusing to them.
Yeah, and not just loyalty to an ideology. Again, like they're not loyal to their base; they're loyal to sort of their donors, number one, and then also like if they're trying to be not donor centric, then they're ideologically pure and trying to be like, well, I align the most with Mises. Like that's me.
I mean, if they would just try to align with Mises, we might be slightly better off. But
right.
Yeah, if you're going to be aligned with something, but
if you're competing for Mises's vote, then you're like, great, cool. But people are more central than ideas.
Yeah, we're never going to get the condition of England question from the Republican Party. They're never the condition of Alabama is just never going to be the thing that they ask, unfortunately. And until someone does, they're never really going to understand what politics is all about. All right, guys. So that said, thank you everybody for coming by. Had a great time talking to Wade. Again, make sure that you check out his show. Thank you everybody who is joining us. Make sure that, of course, if you have not subscribed to the channel, you go ahead and do so now. And if you'd like to catch these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the Auron Macintyre Show on your favorite podcast network. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.